It's a couple of minutes after 3:30, so I'd like to get started. I'd like to be able to keep us on schedule to be done at or before 5 o'clock so everybody can get home at a decent time. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. My name is Jessica Fieldhouse. I am the Director of Community Development for Springettsbury Township. To my right is the Township's Assistant Planner, Rafael Kaloya. Rafael and I have been working probably since this time last year on pulling together the program requirements for Springettsbury Township's water quality program. And everybody here sitting at the tables and the public, we're very thankful to have. Our goal for this meeting is to use your volunteerism here this afternoon and hopefully for our other two meetings to perfect the water quality program. And I apologize for the little bit of feedback. So we will get into some introductions. I'm going to get into a little bit of a background. I think it's really important for everybody to understand what brought the township and all of us to this point. We'll talk about what our strategies are for compliance with our water quality regulations, and then get into the meat and potatoes of the program itself. Couple of notes for everybody. We have a couple of different ways for folks to interact with township staff during this meeting. We are asking that any real in-depth questions be held for the end of the meeting. However, we do have an electronic option for folks to interact. So there are instructions on the back of the acronyms and definition sheet on your table. There are instructions for how to text in questions. We also have index cards on the table. If you'd like to write down your question, we can pull the index cards at the end of the meeting and go through all of that. The role of this committee, like I said, this is a working group. So again, thank you all for being here. And our goal with this working group is not so much to discuss why we're doing this. We're going to get into that, but really we have some regulations that are coming down from the federal and state governments that need to be met. The objective of this meeting and the meeting in July and the meeting in August is, like I said, to go through the program documents that we've created. So we have a fee that we will be implementing, and we would like to have the advisory committee's feedback on that program and that fee. Just so that everybody knows, and there's a postcard at your seat, this is a listing of all of the Board of Supervisors' next meeting dates up until September. I can't guarantee that this program will be on the agenda for all of those meetings, but there is a 7 p.m. public comment time frame that is open for anybody in the township, resident, property owner, and otherwise to provide public comment and public feedback. All the meetings start at 7 p.m. And public comment starts pretty soon following the start of the meeting. Let's get into the background, please, of why we're here. So the background is, at the end of the day, the reason we're here is because of the Clean Water Act implemented by the federal government in 1972. As a part of that Clean Water Act, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System was created in 1987. Those of us in the business know it as NPDES. In 1990, EPA implemented Phase 1, which required NPDES permits be submitted to probably the local state jurisdiction that was handling administration for EPA, which in our case would have been DEP. So in 1990, Phase 1 was implemented, and that required that industrial entities with discharges submit for an NPDES permit. And then in 1999, they came out with the regulations that very much impact Springettsbury Township, permitting for small MS4s. And MS4, and it's on your acronym sheet at your table, stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So as a result of Springettsbury Township being classified as an MS4, we then had a new program of requirements that had to be met as part of being a permit holder and discharging stormwater. And so and what that NPDES permit allows us to do is basically discharge stormwater to our local waterways. And that means that Even the gutter on the roadway is considered a part of our stormwater management infrastructure. That water hits the road, it's going to flow downhill and at some point end up in a waterway. We need a permit in order for that to happen. To further complicate issues, in about 2008, 2009, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation sued the US EPA and won that lawsuit. And basically at the bottom, at the basis of that lawsuit was that the EPA was not implementing the Clean Water Act appropriately, and the conditions in the Chesapeake Bay had deteriorated rapidly, and the Supreme Court agreed with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. As a result, there were 8 total maximum daily load areas created. And you can see here in the map, Pennsylvania is one of them, as is New York, Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, Virginia, and West Virginia. The total maximum daily load set a maximum amount of pollutants that could be in our waterways and still maintain a healthy waterway. They are much lower than what we have now. And so what we have been doing as Bay communities is implementing watershed implementation plans to bring our levels of pollutants down to what was required in the total maximum daily loads. Pennsylvania currently is implementing phase 2 of its watershed implementation plan, and then is also concurrently creating the requirements necessary to implement phase 3. So what does that mean for Pennsylvania? What the TMDL did as a result of this court case was required that by 2025, Pennsylvania meet the metrics shown on the screen. So essentially we had to, by 2025, show a 37% reduction in nitrogen in Springettsbury Township waterways, a 40% reduction in phosphorus, and a 35% reduction in sediment. This slide kind of shows us where we're at. Pennsylvania, I can't corroborate this, but my sense of it is that Pennsylvania is behind the pack out of all of the other 7 TMDLs that were established. So what this graphic is showing is the red is obviously the areas that we are not achieving our goals in. The UNS polluted runoff is urban and suburban polluted runoff. We are not meeting the goals that were set for the state, and we will not achieve the requirements that were set for the TMDL by 2025. So as a result, the state's watershed implementation plan for phase 2, which we're implementing now, required a 10% reduction in sediment, and then we're expecting more rigorous compliance requirements for phase 3 in our next permit cycle. Before I get into the difference between MS4 and Chesapeake Bay Pollutant Reduction Plan, this is very much in a nutshell what got us to this point. And as a result of Pennsylvania not meeting its requirements, we did see an uptick in compliance investigation by the EPA, probably in 2014, 2015, 2016, mostly before the change in administrations with the federal government. However, York City was fined several $100,000 for noncompliance, as were several Lancaster County municipalities. So that's something that Springettsbury Township would like to avoid. We want to implement compliance so that we can avoid those costly fees and repercussions. So there are 2 parts of what we're talking about here. MS4, like I said, stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. Just to explain that a little bit, we have a municipal municipal storm sewer system. It's separate from our sanitary system. So larger cities like Philadelphia and DC have a combined system where stormwater and sanitary are ending up at the same place and being treated. For Springettsbury Township, we've got a separate stormwater system. It does not go to the treatment plant for the water to be treated. The water is conveyed all to, at one point or another, a township waterway. The MS4 program that was established for the township in 2003 had 6 major components. And the MS4 program established by the state was intended to act administratively along with what we were doing. It wasn't meant to have a whole lot of heavy lifting with it. So it was supposed to work with township policies and procedures that were already in place, meaning we're required to document our procedures for our public works department for how we do certain things so that we can ensure that we're not inhibiting water quality. So for instance, if we're saw cutting in a roadway, there's inlet protection that needs to be put in place. We need to have those standard operating procedures written down. There are public education and outreach components. So the MS4 program is made up of what are called MCMs, and there are 6 of them. Those are called minimum control measures. These are the different functional program areas for the township's MS4 program, which has been in place since 2003. Each one of those MCMs has then several, I would say between 3 and 6 best management practices, and these are tasks that need to be completed on an annual basis that DEP has set for us. If we complete these tasks, we are then attaining the minimum control measure, and these are things that staff are doing currently, and here are some examples. I'm not going to run through all of these because, like I said, we've been doing this since 2003, but it requires us to hold public meetings, seek public involvement and participation, and say, for instance, we have an illicit discharge and detection and elimination program, so we can find pollutants in the waterways. And I'll give you an example. Most recently, we had a resident call in and tell us that was it Kreitz Creek? So a tributary to Kreitz Creek near their house in Century Woods had gray water flowing through it. So Raphael and I took the comment and we said, all right, well, where are the headwaters? And we started up at Rocky Ridge and found out that there was a construction project that had failing ENS measures, and we had to call DEP, call the County Conservation District, have them come in and work with the contracting firm to fix the issue. The Chesapeake Bay Pollutant Reduction Plan is a little bit different. It is part of our MS4 program, but it is a new requirement set as part of this 2018-2022 NPDES permit cycle. This is where we're getting really to the nitty-gritty of why we're doing this meeting today. Because, as I said, Pennsylvania is nowhere near meeting its requirements for its watershed implementation plan or achieving its 2025 goals. We were tasked, and I'm not sure how many of you have heard this, it's considered an unfunded mandate. We're being mandated by the state and federal government to do this. However, we are not being provided with any funds to do it. So what they are mandating is that during this permit cycle between 2018 and 2022, we need to show a 10% sediment reduction. We also have to show the 5% reduction in phosphates and the 3% reduction in nitrates. However, what DEP has told the township and the rest of Pennsylvania MS4s is that if we attain the 10% sediment reduction, we're meeting all of the other permit requirements with regards to these water quality areas. So sediment reduction is what our key is for this permit cycle, and what does that mean? Sediment reduction can only be done by construction, or best use of dollars can only be done through on-the-ground construction projects. And what we're talking about is stream bank stabilizations and floodplain restorations. We need to find the waterways, the areas of the waterways in the township that have sheer vertical channels, where every time we get a torrent of rain and it rushes through, it's ripping away the sidewalls of that tributary. We need to fix that. That is where that 697,000 pounds of sediment need to come from. And the only way we can really truly achieve that goal is by putting those construction projects on the ground. So to go backwards just a little bit, and how we developed that 697,000 pounds is based on guidance from DEP. And essentially it's based on the amount of impervious area that we have in the township. Impervious area, as many of you know, is anything basically that's not grass and not trodden down dirt. So any bit of driveway, building footprint, roadway, water cannot get through that. That's impervious area. In addition, and Springettsbury Township I think is a little unique, Springettsbury Township also has what is considered to be 18 impaired waterways. So the 18 impaired waterways, combined with a very developed township created a very large sediment reduction number, 697,000 pounds to be exact. I do not have those calculations available today, but we do have them. If anybody here on the committee would like to look at those calculations, we are happy to provide them. So this gets us to compliance. What can we do to meet these goals that have been established for us? So at the end of 2018, the township came up with 2 compliance goals. One, obviously, we have millions of dollars of on-the-ground construction improvements that have to be done in order to meet these water quality requirements. We need a funding source. And 2, in order to develop that funding source, we need to have a sustainable water quality program budget. So at the end of 2018, this is what staff started working on. So in order to develop a compliance fee, we had to have the municipality flown at a much lower altitude than what the free aerial imagery that's available with the county planning commission. So we had the township flown at a lower altitude, and then we conducted an impervious coverage analysis. And I will have Rafael Kaloya go into a little bit more about what that coverage analysis was. Our second compliance goal was to establish the overall budget for this water quality program. We needed to figure out what is it going to cost to do these construction projects. So part of that goal was to let an RFP for project management, to have a firm assist the township in the design, permitting, and construction of these water quality projects, these stream bank stabilization and floodplain restorations. And then 2, the other really important number is this is not just about new construction projects on the ground. We also have a lot of existing stormwater, storm sewer infrastructure in the township that was placed probably in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And all of that infrastructure, primarily metal corrugated pipe, now needs to be, I would like to say repaired, but I think most of it needs to be replaced in some manner. And so what we did was we had lines televised in early 2019 in the Penn Oaks Park neighborhood. The township, we could not go through and televise all of the storm sewer lines, but picking one neighborhood and one of our oldest neighborhoods with stormwater management infrastructure will give us a very good, solid number on what we think operation and maintenance of that system will be on an annual basis. The project management coupled with the operation and maintenance and then the overall impervious coverage numbers are what lead us to our fee. And I'm going to go backwards here, and I would like for Rafael to just briefly talk about what our GIS analysis looked like.
Thanks, Jess. I was primarily in charge with doing the analysis to determine what a fee would look like for residents and business owners. And to do that, we first had to take aerial imagery that was acquired, was taken in mid-December. And what that aerial imagery needed to do was provide us infrared data, so that way we can get a good sense of on the ground what's impervious and what's pervious, because impervious is going to return a different infrared signal than pervious will. So using GIS software, which GIS is computer mapping software, we use a system called ArcGIS, which is the industry standard for any sort of GIS analysis. We took that aerial imagery and we ran an analysis to pick out every pixel in that imagery and determine whether that pixel was pervious or impervious. Oh. So basically, if you look at the screen there, the top image is going to show you what the infrared imagery looks like. So impervious area is going to give you more of a red colored return, and pervious area is going to give you more of a blue or gray colored return. So that imagery then took that and then assigned what the bottom picture looks like. If you could go to the next slide, Jess. That'll show us the entire township, what that looks like when you compare all of it with gray being the impervious surface in the township and green is the pervious surface.
And I'm sorry for interrupting, but what I'd like to share is that what we see here is that the majority of the township's impervious area can be found in our commercial and industrial areas as opposed to our residential areas.
Yep. All right, and we can go to the next slide here.
Wrong way.
There we go. So doing that analysis, we then compared the number of impervious surface for each parcel. So the way we did that was we took each pixel and compared it to a square foot and assigned the number of square feet on a normal parcel with number of square feet of impervious surface on a parcel. And what we found was the average residential parcel is going to have about 3,000 square feet. 53% of the parcels in the township have 4,000 square feet or less of impervious area, yes. We came up with a median of 3,671 square feet. So it's telling us that most of the township is within it, being residential parcels, is in that 3,000 square foot range, and we use that as the basis to determine what is called an ERU, or equivalent residential unit. So I think we can go to the next slide here. Yeah. So here's a map of when we broke everything out to equivalent residential units. What you see here is that anything that's at the 0.5 is 2,000 square feet or less. Anything that's at the 1 is between 2,000 and 4,000 square feet. And then it goes up on 2,000 square foot increments. Oh, okay.
So I'd like to just add in, there are certain areas on this map that have this very dark green covering that shows a lot of impervious area. And some of those areas look a little funny. Like, for instance, Rocky Ridge Park is identified as one of the lots with the highest amount of impervious coverage. And that is because of their parking areas and the length and width of their access drive. So it's not the entire parcel, but it's because of the number that parcel represents. They find themselves in the higher category, and that is the same for all of the parcels that you find along the Cadorus too, for that same reason.
Yes. And what you'll find there is with the larger number of impervious areas, so the very dark colors, those are just what's called per ERU. So when we're assessing a fee for those sites, we're going to divide the total number of impervious area on that site by 3,000. And then those are that would base their fee off of that. So where everything preceding that is going to be on a scale basis. So if you're a single family home, if you have between 2,000 and 4,000 square feet, you're going to pay the same fee. Whereas anything over, and I believe it's 14,000 or 14,000 square feet of impervious surface is going to be charged per 3,000 square feet of impervious surface.
Okay, so that's how we started devising getting to know what the impervious coverage looks like in the municipality. And as I said before, compliance goal 2 was to establish a budget. So we did, as I said, let a project management RFP. We received 2 responses, and those responses varied immensely. There were 2 both very qualified firms, but proposed different methods entirely. For how to accomplish our EPA requirements for sediment reduction. So the first response we received gave us the quote of $7.60 per pound of sediment reduction, which gave us a total project cost of about almost $5.3 million. The second proposal we received, and I should add with the first proposal response, they were proposing mostly floodplain restoration, and that's a much larger project. The width of that project and the area of impact is much larger. As opposed to that, proposal response number 2 came in at $2.71 per pound of sediment removed, or a total project cost of $1.9 million almost. The difference here is that firm number 2 with the lower number was proposing mostly stream bank stabilizations, and both firms were excellent proposals, and both firms had coordinated with DEP appropriately. But in the end, the township is working towards contracting with Team 2 with the lower number with mostly stream bank stabilizations. And what that's going to look like are stabilization projects on township-owned land, waterways, with low-pressure ground or earth-moving equipment. So our footprint and our area of disturbance will be much smaller. And still, we can accomplish the sediment reduction goals that we need to meet. Okay, so our budget, and this is really the nitty-gritty. And these are all draft numbers, and we have still some maneuverability and some work that needs to be done on our budget, but I would like to point out some of the major aspects of this budget. We are anticipating that from an employee standpoint, managing this program, we'll need at a minimum 1.5 employees, probably a half or part-time employee in accounting to handle invoicing, and a full-time employee in community development to manage the program. And I'll get into a little bit more what that employee will do, but essentially there will be a credit program associated with this stormwater program. The credit program will allow people to implement some of their own BMPs and then take a percentage off of what their overall fee is to the township. In addition to that, I have some other minor categories that are typical for something you'd find, and you'd see this starts to look a lot like a utility, but we are not proposing a utility. But as a utility would, we will have engineering requirements that need to be met. There will be some legal service line items that need to be included. The big numbers here are the maintenance and repairs, and right now we're estimating maintenance and repair on the existing system to be about $500,000 annually. That is a placeholder number. One of the things that the advisory committee will be reviewing with staff at the July meeting is our analysis of the line televising and what the existing condition is of our stormwater management infrastructure. We'll have a much better number at that second meeting. And then the BMP construction, also estimated at about $500,000. It will be slightly lower because the number that our target number is about 1.9 million, but we're also 1 year into our MPDES permit cycle. So there are some variables that are up in the air, but at the end of the day, what we're looking at is about a $1.78 or $1.8 million budget for this water quality program on an annual basis. And that's an important number to know because that's how we're going to get to our total fee. So essentially, as Raphael said, one equivalent residential unit is equal to 3,000 square feet of impervious area. And our initial calculations are showing with that $1.78 million annual budget that one ERU will cost $50 per year. What we also developed was a tiering schedule. We wanted to make allowances for properties with less impervious coverage than others. We do have some very small lots in Springettsbury Township in some of our older neighborhoods. A 3,500 square foot lot is not likely to have 3,000 square feet of impervious coverage. So for those residential property owners with between 1 and 2,000 square feet of impervious coverage, they'll be paying the half ERU fee. And then we move up to there. Anything greater than 14,000 square feet of impervious area will be charged per ERU, and then we have in the tiering up to 3.5 ERUs. So the second part of this is the credit program, and we will be providing a copy of what our draft credit program looks like now. But what we want to do is encourage innovation and compliance with our property owners. We want property owners to be implementing best management practices. We want property owners to be adopting inlets. We want property owners to be planting trees. We want property owners to be retrofitting basins and creating rain gardens. All of these BMPs will equate to some type of a credit in your stormwater fee that you're paying annually. The maximum credit is up to 45%. And this is not something that Springettsbury Township staff created solely on their own. We did use a template. Derry Township has a very similar credit program. We did utilize their template credit program. So obviously, the amounts of percentages can be changed, but at the end of the day, what we cannot change the costs that the township will have to bear in terms of continuing operation and maintenance of the stormwater system and construction of the BMP. So we have flexibility to move that credit around, but at the end of the day, we still need to be bringing in the dollars that we need in order to manage this program. Different credits can be applied to equal up to a 45%. Most of the credits will be valid for 5 years, and then the township will have inspections, and this is also a requirement of our MS4 program overall to inspect stormwater management infrastructure. So a lot of this gets us closer to some of the things we'd like to be doing with our MS4 already. And then we also have the ability to revoke or reinstate credits if they're not being maintained, so on and so forth. Just to go back to the fee, at this point, what we're proposing is an annual fee with the option for property owners to pay quarterly. When it comes to frequency of billing, we would be changing then, updating that on an annual basis as the program stands now. That's the majority of township staff's presentation. We wanted to use this first meeting as a jumping off point to explain to everybody why we're here and why the township is investing this energy in this program. And the work that we've done to this point. In July, on the 17th, what we'd like to go over is our conditions assessment, like I said, of our existing stormwater infrastructure, a detailed review of the program budget, and then a detailed review of our proposed credit program. All of the documents necessary for that will be provided to the advisory committee via a link several weeks before the meeting. The credit program is available, can be sent now, as well as the budget. We just don't have the analysis of the existing conditions available. At this point, I'd like to open up for any questions or clarifications that staff can make.
With the annual fee, how long, like, is this forever, or is that until the process is complete?
That's a really, really great question. So it will be a long-term fee. The process will essentially never be complete. What the township will be able to do is on a permit cycle basis, we can claim any work, we can claim all of the work that we did in the previous permit cycle. But based on our coordination with DEP, we expect those requirements to inch up every permit cycle. So there will be something in addition we will have to do.
Here's the big one. I'm a homeowner. I'm just going to get a bill. Are you going to spend a lot of time on education of our residents so that they understand this? Because coming from the school board, the first person that's going to get blamed is the school board. You do understand that. They're going to come back to us. Why is this? We're going to say, we don't call the township, call you at the township,
sure,
or whatever. And who's going to make the big determinations for big properties like school districts?
So I'll handle that in 2 steps if you're okay with it. So right now we're in the very preliminary stages of introducing this program. The advisory committee is our first step. We want to vet everything we have with this committee first. Following that, we will engage in a community outreach program where we will be providing detailed specific information to residents to help them understand this program. The second part of your question, the determination will be based on the amount of impervious coverage that the property owner has, and whether it's a retail shopping complex, a faith-based organization, a nonprofit, or a school district, the amount of impervious coverage will be based on the computer analysis we did with the aerial photography.
You have the ability to challenge that.
You do have the ability to challenge it. So in the credit program, we do have a section where challenges can be made, and we are expecting challenges to be made. One of the reasons why we took so much time with this, we wanted to make sure that we had a very defensible process and formula to follow for identifying impervious coverage.
When do you expect these fees to begin?
The fees at this point, we're anticipating January 1 of 2020.
Subject to board approval of
Exactly.
all of this.
Thank you.
In reference to the stream bank stabilization, how will you guys go about, let's say an industry says, hey, we want to, there's this area XYZ, we want to, increase the stream bank stabilization. You come out and take a look at that first, and then you will come out afterwards and say, yes, we agree with you, and then you can figure out a potential credit from there?
Yeah, in order to have the credit count for the property owner, we need to make sure that the stabilization or the sediment reduction will count in the eyes of EPA and DEP. So we would have to review the plans for the stabilization, probably have some construction inspection, and then verify ongoing operation and maintenance for the long term. And then that credit can stay in place.
Jessica, I guess a question on, how do you handle the component of like agricultural processes? I mean, with fields, which obviously during storms or whatever can get a lot of runoff. It may be a site that's 100% grass, or field, but yet we all know to a certain extent there's a significant amount of runoff that goes in. How is that being addressed or captured?
So that's a really great question, Kevin. And I'm going to go back here a little bit. Agricultural areas are a separate focus area for this program. Municipal governments are responsible for the urban and suburban polluted runoff. The agricultural areas have to work with the conservation district, which is an arm of DEP. So the county conservation district is working with the ag property owners to implement erosion and sedimentation control plans that will help mitigate some of that runoff. Some of you may have even seen some of these measures in place. I know in Windsor Township, where there's a handful of farms, they have implemented some measures. You're seeing the bales of hay staked to the ground where they have runoff issues to try and hold some of that in. So the ag areas are being regulated. They're just being regulated by a different arm. They are not included in our MPDES permit. That's a great question.
Will the community get credit for work that has been done in the past? For example, all the work that the sewer plant did to upgrade, and many local construction projects. There was one on Eastern Boulevard and Mill Street where they put very extensive underground water recharge systems. Do they get credit for that?
No. So, and that's a really excellent question. So for the first part of that, Charlie, the wastewater component, that's also, is that, right, separate MPDES permit, and those upgrades were done in 2007, 8? And as you can see on this, $25 million. Yes, and as you can see by this slide, that's the only area where Pennsylvania is meeting its 2025 TMDL requirements. Charlie, what you said about underground infiltration and existing stormwater management facilities, if the facilities don't go above and beyond what DEP already requires, we cannot claim credit for it. There may be some area where, because Springettsbury Township's stormwater management goes above and beyond DEP's requirements, and this won't make sense to some of you, but for some of you it will. We have a requirement where, and I can have the township engineer get into it more, where we require that the pre-development condition be assumed meadow. Whether it's a turkey hill that's 100% concrete or it's an open farm field that's never been developed, the stormwater management calculations need to start with the assumption that it's a meadow and we're completely covering it with concrete. We might be able to allow folks to claim credit for that additional 80% that they're assuming is meadow above and beyond what DEP does, but really it has to be these new BMPs that really get into treating the water quality and not just holding it for rate and volume. And John, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think you captured that correctly.
Mr. Chairman.
So for businesses, for instance, that have some type of water feature running through the property, we're saying that the township is only going to be working on township-owned land, and that if businesses do something in their property, that they could get credit for the work that they do, or will the township work in all areas of the township that they may gain large reductions in sediment with approval of a property owner using the funds that are raised through this process?
Let me try, if I understand that, I think yes is the answer to both of those, but it's going to be phased. So yes, a private property owner, if they have a reach of tributary or stream on their property, want to stabilize it, yes, you will get credit for that. So will Springettsbury Township. We will catalog those credits and that will go towards our sediment reduction. More than likely, we will phase in working on private properties as this program gets established and as we work into our 2023, 2028 NPDES permit cycle. We will branch out from township-owned land to private property.
I guess one other question on it is, when you're talking about getting credits, and it sounds like the township's then going to take advantage of those, of the work that's done, as far as being able to get credit for it also, then theoretically, I mean, this is theoretically, we may not need to spend as much money. Because theoretically, if a bunch of, private property owners came in and did everything to meet that 600 and some thousand threshold, so I guess there could be some savings in the process. Yes, you're giving that up as a credit, but you're also getting something in return for it.
Yes. Theoretically, yes, exactly. That one of the issues is that it takes a very large area to get a very large amount of sediment reduction. So we will be able to claim sediment reduction that property owners implement themselves. The number just will not equate to what we are proposing in larger areas. So say, for instance, we had a reach of stream. It is privately owned, but this is a good example of a project where it's, how long do you think that portion of that trip to Crates Creek is off of Eastern?
A mile.
It's a mile. So it's a mile reach of stream. And I think the estimate was that if we did stream bank stabilization, we could get anywhere between 200 and 300,000 pounds of sediment reduction. And that's for one piece of property that's got a mile reach of stream. So Kevin, yes, the answer.
Low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great question, though.
Jessica, another question. In reference to the fact that the township has flown the properties, I'm not sure what the level of detail was, but is there anything in reference to potential facilities or properties that you saw where there could be improvements made that you guys would enforce improvements to be made?
Are you speaking just in regards to water quality?
Yes.
We did more, the flyover was more for giving us the data, the infrared data that we needed at the scope that we needed it so that we could do the impervious coverage analysis. What we have done, Sharon, is an on-the-ground assessment of tributaries and waterways, and we've picked, as Kevin said, the low-hanging fruit areas and those areas where the stream bank has to be, the more degraded the stream bank is, the more of an issue it has every time it rains, the more vertical that stream wall is, the more sediment reduction we can claim. If it's not really in bad shape, then we're not really going to get a lot for that project, and it's not going to make a whole lot of sense. I would tell you that we're not at the point, we don't have anything in ordinances. We can't require anyone to make improvements they don't want to make. And that was not the intent of the aerial survey.
Well, maybe not in enforcement, but in reference to the credit, then that you have a list possibly of places where you would like to see improvements made?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just share that then later?
Yeah, absolutely. And that list is changing daily. And if property owners want to coordinate with the township and have their property surveyed for a reach of tributary, we're happy to do that. It makes our inventory more complete.
Magnitude of the washout at Mill Creek that we just repaired.
They want to say, I think the number was very close to 697,000 pounds. So what Chairman Swanley is talking about is that we had a washout on Mill Creek, very close to Loucks Mill Road, in fact, and just just like an iceberg calving, a portion of the wall of the stream bank just sloughed off and it exposed some sanitary sewer lines. It was a very big piece of ground. It probably dumped about 700,000 pounds of sediment into Mill Creek, which in turn flowed into the Cadorus, the Susquehanna, and then the Chesapeake.
Do we get credit for that?
It depends. I don't, we'd have to, there's a very strong chance that we could get credit for that because it was stabilized. And I would argue that we should get credit for that. It just depends on whether or not DEP thinks that what we did is worth the credits. John, would you add anything to that?
I think that stabilization, if it can prevent that from occurring in the future, I think we could get credit for it. I think we'd have to go back and inventory it and submit it as a project.
In 2018, the York County Planning Commission proposed creating a countywide stormwater management authority. I know that's continuing to be one of the options that the county commissioners are considering as they move forward in addressing these issues. If that were to come to fruition, how would the creation of the countywide stormwater management authority assist your efforts? I mean, decrease the fee, or would the residents and property owners in Springettsbury Township then be assessed a stormwater management fee from Springettsbury Township as well as the county?
That's a really good question, and I don't have an answer to that yet. We would have to work something out, but there is a difference, and the reason that Springettsbury Township has pulled out ahead of the county is that Springettsbury Township has an MPDES permit with requirements that we need to meet by a specified deadline. And the County Planning Commission is working to pull together a regional entity, which I think is a fabulous idea because at its very heart, water quality is not an isolated issue, it is a regional issue. However, those plans won't be implemented in time for us to get the necessary projects on the ground and meet our MPDES permit. So we're concerned with compliance at this point. I think that there is an opportunity for both programs to work together. We would not want to have the residents charged a dual fee.
So we have a number of other concerns along with that. In the time that the county was working through their estimate of the projects, their numbers doubled multiple times. Their timeline was falling behind, and it was looking more and more like there were a couple of cash cows that they were looking at to fund the lion's share of these projects, Springettsbury Township being one of them. So we felt at that time that it was in our best interest to get out ahead of this, start doing the reductions that we needed so that we were in good shape, wouldn't fall behind in the total projects required, and that it would cost our residents less in the long run.
Thank you.
All right, the other question I had was in reference to the credits, and so we would apply to the township for the credit, and the township then would apply to DEP for the credit?
No, the credit program is something of our own creation. Springettsbury Township has to prove via projects that were placed on the ground, and whether we did that or those are projects that we claim from a development, we need to accumulate enough projects to reach 697,000 pounds of sediment reduced. The credit program with the township is meant as an incentive program to get property owners working with the township.
Would it be fair to assume that this is all going to be wrapped up when we start applying for building permits and things? All this is going to now, moving forward, be tied into future plans, and that we should so act accordingly if we have plans coming along?
If you have plans coming along, it is a really great idea to build in the best management practice construction programs that are identified, and that's rain gardens. John, do you have anything outside of a rain garden that's a good example?
Really, anything with capture sediment. We are in new developments. We're putting in deeper inlets that are along a street so that we prevent the sediment from washing into the pipe. So there's a whole bunch of rain gardens is the primary objective for new developments. You're infiltrating a lot of that water. There are also amended soils that we put in, and the emphasis is trying to infiltrate this water. But
and there are other things. Planting trees will result in a credit.
Well, we always do that here in the town.
So there will be ways to try and cut down on the fee. And just to get into the other part of your question, I'm sorry about that. Right now, Ellen, this is a property owner-based fee, and I'm not sure how much building permits and development will get into this. Obviously, if you build in the BMP construction into your proposed development, you will get the credit, and the township would love to have the BMP construction.
I'm thinking, school districts are not, they're not residential and they're not commercial. Are we a different animal or?
So there are two animals in terms of this program. One is residential, the other is non-residential. If you're not residential, you're non-residential.
Okay.
I don't know if we've got them in the township, but I mean, the only other thing that I could see people would appeal on the credits is if some of the impervious, or if some of the, what you define as impervious surface, if it's pervious paving.
Yep, and that's,
Somebody might hit you up on that to think about. You probably, it's not a big issue.
it's already included in the credit program.
Okay.
Yep. And as long as everybody's adhering to the long-term operation and maintenance, that porous paving will remain porous. There are some issues. It's not really appropriate for roadways in this area because of the extreme temperatures and the salting and so on and so forth.
Another question, I know we've talked about the stream stabilization, bank stabilization, but there's also parameters or materials out there available for sedimentation from parking lots. If there's like oil,
Water separators.
well, even I'll say maybe not quite as big as that, but in parking lots you can put in the sediment traps, and some of them are just for soils, some are for oils and soils.
Yep. And this is, Sharon, thank you. This is perfect. This exactly highlights why we wanted to set up this advisory committee, because we need those ideas so that we can coordinate with DEP now to make sure that the items that we put in our credit program are actually claimable for the township to claim a sediment reduction. So any innovative ideas for how reductions can be achieved, we will coordinate with DEP to see if there is the potential to do that.
Would existing trees be credited or only new trees?
My assumption when I and I didn't write it, but when I reviewed it and made it Springettsbury Townships, my assumption was that it would be new trees. I don't want to say no because we're creating the program now, so we can delve into that.
Consider existing trees because they do absorb a lot of water.
What are the documentation requirements from DEP? Is this purely a design basis, or is there going to be some kind of follow-up to make sure we're actually hitting the requirements?
Are you saying for the credit program that the township is creating, or for our overall MS4 program?
I'm saying for the overall MS4, we have
Yep.
to get a 10% reduction. How are we documenting that, and how, like, is DEP going to come in and say, no, we checked the water in the township and you only got a 4% reduction?
Well, that's an interesting question. And so far, and I think that the chairman and the township engineer will agree with me, DEP has been changing their stance on a lot of this program. It's new for them too. And they're trying to see their way through it. Right now, DEP and EPA rely on audits to ensure that we are completing our MS4 requirements. With regards to the Chesapeake Bay Pollutant Reduction Plan requirements, those projects will all be permitted with DEP, so there will be close inspection processes going on throughout the life of that project. We will have to document to DEP that the construction project was completed per the standards that were necessary, and that and the big part here is the long-term operation and maintenance, because if we have a big storm roll through, a hurricane, and it damages a portion of the stream that was stabilized, we have to fix that or we will have an issue.
I was just curious because obviously with waterways, Springettsbury Township is collecting water from all the townships upstream of us, so it's a little unfair to test something for sediment
I think that
levels.
was some of our challenge with like, for instance, DEP for stream restoration uses a reduction of 44 pounds per lineal foot. Well, the Cadorus is different from Mill Creek, is different from 3 Mile Run, is different from on and on. But the consultant that we hired has had his hands on this testing, and that was the other concern, that when the county was going through their authority that they were contemplating, and they were told by DEP, now you have to prove to us that those numbers are accurate. I believe the consultant we have, that we vetted, will be able to document that we are meeting this 10% goal, and it'll be up to DEP to prove us wrong. But we now have projects on land. That was the other issue with the county, was they were looking at different communities to be the permittees. Springettsbury has a vast quantity of open space through parks and lands that they've bought through floodplains. So at that point, the township decided that we have all the pieces to put in the puzzle. If we put out an RFP, we can meet that. And looks like we're going to meet our deadline. We're going to meet our sediment requirements, and hopefully, if everything falls into place, this won't be a really bad cost to everybody. And we're trying to, as the chairman said, we're trying to keep these, stay on target and get the best cost for our work.
Any other questions?
As we continue to move forward and we have measures that are put in place, we talked about the 5 years that you would want to have that credit. Obviously, with the experience that we already have, we have some BMPs that we're required for, and you're supposed to go do inspections after certain rain events. You keep all those records yourself that they're supposed to be available, right?
Correct.
So is that something then that as somebody's applying, saying they've done these actions, that would be something that we would also roll out as meaning that they would then, we would want them to be continuing to do it, that they would do inspections, that then would say, yes, I put the structure in, I'm maintaining it.
Yeah.
So we would ensure.
Are you saying for, just so I understand, Sharon, do you mean for existing BMPs?
No, for anything that they put in after. After, let's say, January.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I'm exactly picking up, but you're talking about anything that a private property owner does on their property, will they have to? Yes. Yes.
Yeah, because we have things that we have to do, that we've
Yeah.
signed up to do, but then there's these things that we're going to voluntarily do for credits.
Yes, and so you will have to, in order to keep your credit on an annual basis, and then even after that for the other permit cycles, you will more than likely have to provide the township with a copy of the inspection documents, and then we'll have to do, spot checks to ensure that to inspect what we're expecting. Yes, sir.
Are these credits designed for residential property too?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, and they're designed to be easily attainable. One of the credits is adopting an inlet. It's an annual credit. You adopt the inlet. You make sure that it's cleaned out before every rain event, and it's free and clear of debris. All the way to, small rain gardens, porous pavers, planting trees, like I said. There are any number of easily attainable residential credit options.
Just connecting rain gutters is not one. But very big in urban areas like in Minnesota, St. Paul, Minneapolis. They had all the houses, all the rain gutters directed all their water to the street. And so they cut those back and try to get them to discharge to the grass so that water in the small storms goes back into the groundwater table. And that's the emphasis today.
Yes, sir.
So each residential house, like they'll be inspected by you, or?
No, you will. So the burden of the credit program will be placed on the homeowner. So the homeowner will have to fill out a credit application. You will have to tell us what your BMP is and provide us with the operation and maintenance. And then the township's responsibility as part of our MS4 program is that we're spot checking. We need to have some type of program in place. And maybe we're not going to every property every year, but we're inspecting every property every 3 or every 4 years.
Now, when you say inspected, you mean the way where the water comes and all that?
Let's say, for instance, that you're using a rain barrel. We would want to inspect that to make sure that you were winterizing it appropriately and it wasn't damaged because of seasonal weather temperatures and just leaking and not really functioning. If you had a rain garden, we'd want to make sure that you were maintaining that rain garden and it wasn't becoming overgrown with invasive species.
I guess I'm speaking as a homeowner here because the school district is going to be a whole different animal with pervious and impervious surfaces, things like that. But homeowners, we're going to get a bill. Are you going to tell us how many square feet you think we have and how much
Yep, absolutely. The bill,
each?
and that's a really great question. So the township needs about 3 months of invoice testing in our finance department before we can roll this out. So that will begin in September, October, and that is one of the issues. We need to show the exact amount of square footage that we believe a property has. And we definitely expect to get appeals.
I can't imagine your pictures show the driveway is this and the sidewalk is that and all the rest is grass. I mean, is that the
Yes.
possibility? Okay.
Well, no, well, that's why we flew the, that's why we
So
flew
you
the.
can get that out of your.
Yes, that's
areas.
why we did
Okay.
the aerial imagery, because we can see down to the sidewalk versus the grass.
So when we get a bill and it tells us what the square footage is and what it's going to cost, will you also be able to say, if you do this on your property, it will decrease the amount that you owe so that you can get a credit, so that you're educating the property owner on what they can do to improve their property to correct the situation?
I think so. I think what I would put on that invoice, and again, I don't know how much area we have. That's not my specialty, but what I would imagine we'd have on there is information to contact the township about the credit program and how they can decrease their fee.
Sorry.
Is that lot area data going to be available before the invoicing goes out, so that property owners can, take a look at, maybe they're being assessed for several thousand square feet of, I'm thinking of larger commercial or private facilities. They'll have hey, we think that you have 10,000 square feet of impervious area. It would give the property owner a chance to evaluate that and say, oh, we agree with this, or no, we don't. We want to contest it before the actual invoice gets sent.
Right. That's an excellent idea, and one that I haven't thought of. So we would have to, yes, I think we can do that because we're creating the program from scratch. We would just have to put the necessary steps in place and make sure that, I think we'd have to have ordinances in place or the resolutions in place. We'd have to have the program structured more than we do now. But no, I think that's a very good idea.
Bill that goes out, I'm assuming that our printing company can tell us what the weight is and how many pages we can put in there without increasing postage. So I think we could put some educational materials in there
Absolutely.
along with the bill each time so that people know exactly what they have available to them as options.
Yes, that's an excellent idea also. Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can even do it electronically, like what you do the sewer bills and that type of thing that you're doing currently.
Mhm.
We could save paper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All citizens can go on the county website, to the tax website, and you can look up your property. If you want a map and find your property, and it'll give you a complete rundown of how many acres you have and everything about your property, what your taxes are, and what the homestead credit is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that, yes, that's also true. Springettsbury Township has also developed a similar tool that we haven't made public yet, and that tool can be utilized, can it not, to show the impervious coverage?
At this time, no, but.
Could it be?
It would be, we can do something similar to
Yeah.
allow residents to be able to search for your address and show what the property looks like with impervious coverage and the levels and all that.
Right, and I think that would get to Mr. Beauregard's comment. We could have that link up and running. In addition to all of the other pertinent lot data, it would also contain the amount of impervious. Any other questions, comments?
To clarify, from my perspective as representing the school district, they will be getting the same kind of a bill that says,
Yes.
for the three major properties in Springettsbury Township, you have so much pervious, so much impervious.
At this point, yes, the intent is to treat all property owners the same way.
Okay.
However, the program has not yet been approved by the board. We're still in the implementation phases. So all I can tell you is from the staff perspective, yes, that is our goal.
It only makes sense that it should be that way. I mean, so that we're not at least incurring expense to start running around checking all of these statistics until we see what you have, which may well jive with what we know already, and make it a lot less expensive, because obviously we're going to have to pay somebody if we have to have somebody come out and measure and do and so forth and so on. Thank you.
On that same school district, as Jeff and Raphael showed the impervious map, much of the impervious area was geared around the commercial areas and also 83 and 30. those are PennDOT roadways. And I'm surprised nobody asked the question, will PennDOT participate in paying for their
Runoff.
their runoff? And I don't know how that'll get vetted. I don't think they have a separate MS4 permit, as a matter of fact. And they're working on credits themselves. I know Hamden Township implemented this same program a year ago. And a colleague of mine is the engineer up there, and he said to me, well, we didn't get our check in from PennDOT or the neighborhood, which is up in Hamden Township. And I said, I think you'll be waiting a long time for those checks. But PennDOT does, in fact, have a separate MS4 permit, so that might be something where DEP says they're responsible for their stormwater and mitigating the impacts of all impervious area.
Okay, if that's it, what I would like, before we close out, I'd like to bring everybody's attention to the small postcard that was at your table. We have set up a separate email address, waterquality@springettsbury.com. If you have questions as you're thinking about the meeting, if you have questions as you're reviewing additional information, please utilize the email address. Either Raphael or myself will get back to you if it's a more in-depth question. And there are more of the postcards back here if anybody would like to have them. But we will communicate on a regular basis with residents and members of the committee. And I'll place some of these additional postcards here at the podium. And at that, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. We do very much appreciate your time.